Welcome to Recorder Works. Today I want to talk a little bit about my ideology of recorder playing, so some of my values and some of my perspectives around it. Now, I think instruments like the recorder have a very, very interesting history that goes way back beyond the actual recorder, back to early human times really, when we had these bone flutes that we found, and they would have been very special, and the sounds they made would have been very special. Presumably used for some kind of ceremonial purposes, for communicating with the spirits, this kind of stuff. So the flute, in the most general sense, which I'm including the recorder in, and precursors to the recorder, has a very special place in the human heart and soul, really. And I would say in the modern age, it's kind of lost some of its kudos, some of its kind of status. Now, there's been some exceptions, people like James Galway, very famous flute player, and also Jethro Tull with the kind of rock side of things and bringing the flute into that kind of popular consciousness. But generally, flutes have been relegated, I could say, or they've been taken up by quite a small subset of the musical population in very much a kind of classical sense. Classical music, Baroque music, some early music. Some of the early music is really wonderful. I love some of that. But it seems to have this very kind of niche appeal, and also the approach to playing music, I think, for me, leaves quite a lot to be desired, and I'm going to go into that. So what I mean by that is this almost complete reliance on musical notation. If you think of a lot of the music that's on the recorder, even from the classical repertoire, is actually based on dance forms like jigs and polkas and all this kind of stuff. And yet a lot of it's kind of lost connection with those roots, but the origins of it, dance music. And if you look at music that people dance to generally, it's not often that you've got sheet music present. And there's a good reason for that. It's because in order to be able to really give the music that kind of pulsing lift, that kind of real feel, that kind of dynamic energy, you kind of got to be very present to it. And if you've got this distraction of the sheet music, it means you haven't fully embodied the tune, you haven't fully embodied the music. Now, to think of it, a kind of parallel, what that would be like if we were talking about rock music, for example. So you go to a Led Zeppelin concert back in the day, or what have you, or Deep Purple or Pink Floyd, they don't have sheet music, and there's a good reason for that. It's because they are embodying their music in a way that they're actually playing it from deep inside their soul. So they're not just kind of doing a surface level, here's the dots, I'm going to kind of type them into my instrument and off we go and forget about it and do the next tune. It's a much deeper place that the music resides within the people who are performing when they're not using the dots. Now, I think the dots are great for certain things, like if you want to learn more complicated tunes, or if you want to play more complicated tunes where it's just not realistic to memorize a whole concerto or a whole it's kind of really long, complicated piece, although that has been done. For example, there's a band called Red Priest where they play things like Vivaldi's Four Seasons completely from memory. It's perfectly doable. A lot of the kind of oral tradition musicians have vast repertoires of memorized tunes. But there's more to it. So there's something around what it means to rely on the dots. Okay, so I'm not saying they don't have their place, but I'm saying we rely on them so much that we're missing, I think, a massive part of what music playing is about and what sharing music is about. And what's going on there? So we're giving a lot of power to this bit of paper, and we're doing exactly what it tells us. Okay, there's not a lot of room for kind of spontaneous variation. So on the topic of variation, for example, when I learned to play the tin whistle in Irish music, I was taught that you often have this structure in Irish music. You have an A, B, B tune, so an A part that's repeated and then a B part. And I was told never to play the repeat the same as I played the original. So you had to come up with creative ways of changing it spontaneously on the fly. And the way you do that is by learning about ornamentation. So it usually changes an ornamentation, like you might do a roll or a turn and the kind of similar ornaments, or different cuts, or you might breathe in a different place. Or you might do a slight melodic variation, and the more experience you get, the more you can kind of get a feel for what might be an appropriate melodic variation. But the point is, you had this freedom of expression, and you were expected to use that freedom to inject something into so the tune's like the bare bones, it's like the skeleton, but you're expected to inject life into that music. And it's much harder to do that if you're simply, you've got the dots and you're just doing what you're told. Your dots say do this. You're much less likely, to do it, to choose to do it, but also to be able to do it, because it's quite a skill to be able to know a tune well enough to actually, with your eyes closed, lost in music, people dancing. Oh, I'm just going to, do that. I'm going to do that. It's like little changes, little variations, or even just, differences in emphasis or intonation. They all just naturally express themselves when you're lost in the music, to the extent that throwing away those dots allows you to do. And for me, this is really important, because it kind of brings us back to, for me, what the music is kind of about. It's about this almost kind of magical connection with something bigger than ourselves. I mean, if you think about it, there's no obvious kind of biological reason to make music. It's not really a survival skill, is it? It's like, I can play 3-bone mice and say my crops are going to grow better, and I'm going to feed my family. It's not like that. There's some other reason that we do music, and for me, it's a very spiritual thing. And there's something about the kind of the concert context that a lot of this recording music occupies, which is great up to a point, but it's not really doing that thing where you're just kind of giving people that little dose of magic in their lives. So there's this phrase comes from flamenco music called duende, and it means when the music really just kind of takes off and you get that shiver down your spine, and it makes you cry or it makes you laugh with joy. It's that kind of that magical moment, which it can happen in classical concerts. It's, what am I trying to say? It can, and I'm sure it does, but it's not where I look for it, and it's not where I'm particularly interested in finding it, because I think there's something much more down to earth, much more real about the kind of music that I'm interested in. It's a kind of folk music, but not in the sense of like variations on Humpty Dumpty, which a lot of folk music is, unfortunately. It's been like a revival of a tradition that's basically died out, and it's been kind of recreated off the page and lost a lot of its kind of traditional energy and context. But there are dance traditions where it survives. So, for example, the Celtic music, the Irish dance music, for example, the Breton music, and a lot of the klezmer, for example, and like gypsy music, all this kind of stuff, flamenco. There's all these traditions where the goal isn't to impress. It isn't about this kind of artistic. I mean, I've got nothing against the artistic thing, but it can really easily become about showing off how clever something is, rather than nourishing the souls of the musician and the listener. And for me, that's what it's all about. And there's a real freedom in that. And there's the opportunity to give a real gift to others if you're really allowing yourself to just surrender to the music and pass it on to people around you. And yeah, I think we need to. I would like to see more people giving themselves permission to express themselves musically in that way. And I'm particularly interested in the recorder, because I think it's such a fantastic instrument. Although the existing culture around it I find incredibly stifling and limiting. It's like, you've got to have your dots. And, there's no improvisation. There's no like memorizing a simple tune. Even playing like, a simple round like Row Your Boat or something, or Frere Jacques or something. It's like, most people can probably manage Frere Jacques, but doing that in a round, just with two people, eyes closed, it suddenly becomes an immersive, for me, kind of spiritual experience, because it's taking you into an altered state of consciousness, and you're aware of these two parts and how they're kind of, related but out of phase. Or it doesn't have to be rounds, but harmonies, or or just simple melodies that have got either this beautiful soulful expression to them, or have got this kind of uplifting kind of dance. It's like, I often see it when I play in the street. The kids' feet start to move and they're skipping and dancing, and people just appreciate it when you're coming from that place of authenticity and just living the music, expressing the music, and not relying on this, for me, kind of stifling, not very inspiring way of doing recording music, where you've got the dots and everyone's got their music stands, and it's like we play through it once and then we stop. It's not the same. I mean, I've heard early music done in the way that I'm talking about, and it's absolutely amazing. It's really moving. It has some beautiful tunes, and medieval stuff, Renaissance stuff, played in that way that it always would have been. It's like it's kind of lifeblood music. It's not this kind of intellectual exercise or this kind of artificially cultural exercise where we're all very, we're all very, I don't know, what am I trying to say? The kind of preciousness around it, to be honest, And I know for some people it's like they're not doing it the way that I'm suggesting because they don't have the confidence, they don't believe that they could memorize even a short tune and play it. And it does require us, it requires a commitment to develop that skill. To play from memory it's like a muscle that you have to develop. You have to get some strength with it, and it requires some confidence, which you can only really gain through pushing yourself a little bit, kind of testing your courage. I remember when I first played Irish music in an Irish session, I was absolutely terrified. I played The King and the Fairies, Rina Shid, beautiful Irish folk tune. I was shaking, absolutely terrified, with these amazing Irish musicians down in a session in Brighton. Very frightening experience. But it was important enough for me to be part of that, that what those musicians had, what I'd heard them play had inspired me so much. I wanted to be part of that. And, it's in a pub and people are drinking. It's like, you're not, it's just not going to be appropriate to have your sheet music. And it's, you know what I'm saying? Hopefully, if you've listened this far, you kind of know what I'm saying. And hopefully maybe you've got some interest in liberating yourself from the confines of the kind of authority of the page and like giving yourself back some power musically and saying, well, I'm going to learn that music. I'm going to embody it. I'm going to put variations in it. I'm going to make it my own. And for it to be important enough to, like I say, to learn to do that, to overcome your fear and your resistance to doing that, and then to go out and share the love, of this amazing lifeblood, this amazing soul-nourishing thing that we have access to in our lives, aka music, So yeah, that's some thoughts about my ideology around music in general, and specifically the recorder, because I'd love to see a renaissance of the recorder where people throw away the dots, learn some amazing tunes, beautiful harmonies, all the different recorders. That's great, you can have all the different parts, but that more kind of immersive, almost kind of ceremonial, I don't like that word particularly, it doesn't quite do justice to what I'm saying, but that sense of this is special, this is important, it's worth us investing the time to learn the tunes, it's worth us overcoming our resistance, our inhibitions, and creating this kind of magical, nourishing experience for ourselves and others. So yeah, that's my recorder playing ideology. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.